Resilience is cultivated in a context of challenge, of change, of difficulty, of adversity. So you're going to get another handout, if you're in person, on these risk factors. And this is a list of risk factors that I put together long ago, actually, years and years ago, as I was working as the Director of Ministerial Health for the Pacific Southwest Conference of the ECC, working with pastors and churches, growing a culture of health and ministry, and just seeing lots of burnout, and lots of different ways and reasons why pastors would struggle. So some of this is based on my own experience with pastors. Some of this is just based on the psychological research. It's a list of resilience depleters. Okay, these are the things that will naturally deplete our capacity to be resilient. And same thing, would love for you to just look over this list, glance it over, and circle the 3 things that just immediately pop out as true for you now. Okay? As you look over this list, there are things that maybe were true for you before in a different season, but not so much now. No need to circle those. Focus on what is true for you now. This list, some of them might be curious or surprising to you. You might look at this list, and I'll tell you one of the ones that often surprises people is a performance-based identity. I'm like, why is that on the list? Well, performance-based identity means that if I don't do things the right way, exactly right, the best, who am I? Am I lovable? Am I important? Am I, and I'm exaggerating, but really that's kind of what the core of it is, right? Our identity is wrapped up in how well we do, how much we achieve, all of that. And it's hard to have that as your core identity and face hardships and feel like you're struggling. Because now if you're struggling, you're not achieving, right? So performance-based identity is one of those things that is a natural resilience depleter as a general outlook on life, right? Very similarly, perfectionism is like that. If you just expect yourself to do everything 100% perfectly all the time, that's going to be hard when you're in a state of permacrisis, right? Because we have limited capacity and we can't actually do everything perfectly all the time, right? So that's another resilience depleter that is a constant depletion from our capacity. Any questions about any of the other things that are on this list before I ask you to just admit and name some of the ones that you might have circled? Any questions about items on here that might be interesting to you? From the chat as well online, feel free to name. Yeah. Yeah. I always get that question. So thank you for asking that. So geographic incompatibility, that actually I added to the list based on my experience as Director of Ministerial Health and working with pastors who are burning out. And one of the things that I noticed is that sometimes there was a literal geographic incompatibility between the pastor and their context. So I came from California yesterday to be here, and let me tell you, it is so cold here. It's so cold. And praise the Lord that it is sunny, but if it was like rainy and cloudy, like I would just be sad, right? That's geographic incompatibility, okay? So it might be literally climate, of just being in a place where the climate itself is depleting to you, right? Some people love it when it's cold and foggy and all of that, right? And other people are like, I really need the sun. That's geographic incompatibility. Geographic incompatibility can also be cultural. Okay, and so if you're someone who feels really comfortable in an urban setting, but you go to serve or work in a rural setting, that is a really disorienting experience, or vice versa, right? And that is an incompatibility that drains your resilience on a daily basis, literally just walking around town. You know, there's no town to walk around, Jean, it's rural, right? just existing on a daily basis can be an experience of incompatibility that drains your overall capacity to be resilient. Yeah, great question. Question from the chat?
Some of the factors you requested. Dr. Gilliard, there's no longer little time for rest and renewal. Lisa Watley, ongoing fatigue, health problems, financial pressure, health problems, significant family caregiving, no time for close relationships. And yep, that's it for now. Yep.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you, online folks.
Thank you for getting us started, online folks. So in the room, what are some of the things that you all circled here as what you're currently dealing with? No or few hobbies. See some nodding heads with that one. Family stress, yep. Yes, dynamics related to gender, ethnicity, or race. Yeah.
Repeated experiences of loss or bereavement.
Yes, repeated experiences of loss or bereavement. Yeah. These are all really hard things, right? And as you think about these things individually, it's hard to have repeated loss. Right? It's hard to be in a context where you're experiencing maybe gender or power dynamics that are constantly depleting you, right? And that's just like one thing on this big, gigantic list of things, right? So you can see why these would be forces of depletion. And honestly, we can't go through life without encountering these risk factors, right? So at any given time, it's very normal to have multiple things that you would circle that you're dealing with, right? Question?
The chat?
Yes.
Liz T, can demographic incompatibility be a risk factor?
Demographic incompatibility. Yeah. Yes, and there's so many different aspects of our demographics, whether it's age or gender, ethnicity, so many different demographic incompatibility possibilities, unfortunately. All of these things conspire against us in our quest to be resilient, right? And at any given time, you'll have a number of these, and that's just life. It's just life, right? The point to start to be concerned is when you start circling and you're just circling and circling and circling, and you've just got a whole bunch of things on that side of the list and a whole bunch of things on this side of the list, right? That's when you know on the resilience continuum, you are moving far down the end toward depletion. And again, momentum will carry you in that direction. So it's going to be a fight. If you've got a lot of risk factors for resilience depleters, it's going to be a fight to work your way back toward resilience, right? One more thing before we wrap up this morning session. And remember, I told you to bear with me, right? That this morning we're going to talk about what resilience is, what it isn't. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about how to cultivate resilience. Okay, we are going to get there. But for now, we're going to talk about burnout, okay? So burnout is what happens when you're on the depletion end of the continuum. And it's not a I'm burned out, I'm not burned out sort of situation. You can vary in your degree of burnout, mild, moderate, severe. Okay, again, how far you are down that continuum of the resilience versus depletion, right? And there's different kinds of burnout, okay? There is physical burnout. The physical burnout might be because you've got an overloaded schedule, and so you're not eating right, you don't have the energy or time to exercise, you're not sleeping well. And because of that, your immune system is a little bit compromised, you get sick, you have aches and pains. This is kind of impacting your appetite, you're feeling tired all the time. That's physical burnout. That's like a big description of physical burnout, right? But it doesn't just immediately go to that. It might start with, I just got this little crick in my neck, and I don't really know what it is, but I can't get rid of it. Okay, that's the beginnings of physical burnout. Relational burnout occurs when we've got too many relational demands on us, and maybe we begin avoiding people. Maybe there are certain relationships that are particularly draining for us. There's ongoing drama in our lives and the people around us. Or perhaps you're introverted like me, and the relational demands of your ministry are particularly strong in a season, right? And so that is moving you in the direction of depletion and burnout. There's emotional burnout. And this often happens when, as shepherds, as caregivers, we don't have someone caring for us. We don't have someone shepherding us. We're giving out, but we're not taking in. And so the emotional output is far greater than what is being put in. We can begin to feel isolated or numb, maybe carrying just kind of a dark cloud over us, a sense of failure or doubt. Sometimes it manifests as irritability or impatience as opposed to kind of those sad type of emotions, right? And especially for caregivers, for counselors, social workers, therapists, this is where compassion fatigue begins to show up and to give us an indication that we are really moving in the direction of burnout. When we, hear something from a client and we're like, I don't have any compassion left to give you, right? Okay, there is spiritual burnout. And, if you've walked with God for longer than a day, you know that, our relationship with God isn't constant. There's highs and lows, right? But spiritual burnout is kind of a prolonged season of dryness, of disconnection with God, right? And not being able to experience God's love and, not wanting to read scripture or to pray, literally just not having it in us to move in the direction of spirituality. And again, this often happens when we're pouring out, but not taking in, when our devotional life is preparing for sermons as opposed to our devotional life apart from sermons, right? And then there is mental burnout. Mental burnout occurs when we are just constantly overfilled with needing to use our brains to problem solve, to think. The rate of change in our society is astronomical. If you think of what has happened in the last few years, in the last 20 years, compared to, 70 years ago, our world is so different. It's so different now, right? I still can't figure out how to use my updated iPhone. Every time the software updates, I gotta figure out the rate of change is so high. It's requiring us mentally to engage in levels that we really haven't had to historically for decades and decades, right? So mental burnout comes when we're just overwhelmed with having to think and to know and to problem solve. And there's just so much to know in the age of the internet and AI and everything else, right? So it's possible to have symptoms of 1, 2, 3 types of burnout, just mild expressions. I kind of got this little crick in my neck, and I am kind of tired of just being with people. I need to just withdraw a little bit, and I don't feel particularly close to God. It's common to have or different symptoms within different areas and have it be a mild burnout. Okay. But burnout can be mild, it can be moderate, it can be high or severe. And severe burnout is when you were listening to my description of burnout and all the different categories and you're like, yep, 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 yep. When you hit all of the categories, if that's a descriptor of what your life is like, that is a more severe burnout. Question? Yeah.
So if it's possible to have one type or clusters of burnout, are there clusters of resilience where you have points of strength, pockets of strength?
Yes, great question, right? So the question is, if it's possible to have experiences of different types of burnout, or maybe just one particular type of burnout, is it possible to have strength or resilience within that particular area? And yes, absolutely. And that's why I break down burnout into these different categories, because if you can think about it that way, if your symptoms really do cluster in that physical aspect, then you know that that's your starting point for cultivating resilience, is really focusing on your physical health. Yes, praying more is going to help you, but maybe you just need to go to the gym, right? So really focusing on the cluster where you're most experiencing symptoms of burnout will help you to move in the direction of resilience. Yeah, absolutely. Other questions about burnout? Yeah.
Where does vocational burnout or institutional burnout come
Yeah, I thought about adding that as a category. Where does vocational or institutional burnout come in?
Or it could be like an activism burnout, tired of the cause.
Yeah, yeah. Or an activism burnout. Thank you. You're tired of a cause. Yeah, I think honestly that many times when we are spent in what we're doing for our roles vocationally, it's often because we have a combination of these things, right? So we're not experiencing God in our daily work anymore, and it really feels like our own efforts to do whatever it is, to engage in this activism cause or to talk to this person or whatever it is, and we just don't have the emotional energy for that. We're actually just really tired about hearing about people's problems, right? And I don't have the mental capacity to actually engage fully in this and to think about problem solving and how to do this. And honestly, I just don't even really want to do this job anymore. It's often a combination of these things, right? When pastors get to the point, or leaders get to the point of really beginning to question, I don't even know if I want to do this job anymore. I think I'm done. What I have historically said to people is, you might be done, but let's not decide that while you're depleted. Okay? Let's work on getting you a little bit further into the continuum, right? Away from depletion, more toward resilience. And then when you're more resilient, you can accurately discern whether God is calling you out of that position, right? So in and of itself, that sense of like, I just can't do this anymore, I don't think I want to do this anymore, is not necessarily God's way of saying you should be out. It really probably is more a reflection of the burnout that is occurring, right? Good question. Yeah. Other questions from the chat or in the room about burnout? Okay, so here's the thing about burnout. It took you a while to get there. It's going to take you a while to get out. And if it's just a mild burnout, you can take some quick actions and you'll probably begin to feel relief pretty soon, right? But if I describe this and you're like, oh man, that is me, all of that, right? It probably took you a good year or more to get there, and it probably is going to take a year to get back. And as I say that, you're like, a year? What are you talking about? I don't have a year. And okay, it's not going to take a year to feel better, okay? You are going to immediately start to feel better as you begin to implement practices that will move you in the direction of resilience. But it's going to take a year to be able to look back and be like, wow, that was a different person, okay? So I've worked with a lot of pastors in cultivating resilience and formulating a plan for overcoming burnout. I've seen it happen over and over and over again. So no matter where you are on this experience of burnout, even if you're way, way, way down there, there is hope. You really can get out of that space and be restored, right? It's going to take intentional effort and time, okay? But we can get you there. We can get you there. Okay. All right.
I just have a quick comment
yeah,
from
go ahead.
the chat. Chuck says, I've learned I can't run through burnout. I have to walk through it and do healthy things along the way.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that. Yes, you cannot run through burnout. Do you remember our squats? Right? If you're already tired and you're trying to run through burnout, this is going to be a disaster waiting to happen, right? You are going to injure yourself significantly, right? You do have to walk. And honestly, the movement from burnout and depletion to resilience really is a one step at a time kind of experience, right? Slowly but surely we'll get there. Yeah. Any other questions about burnout, depletion, risk? Okay. As we wrap up this first session then, let's do this. Oh, actually, let me just do this real quick. just some descriptors of what you might see for burnout in your life. And again, I mentioned that for some people, it really shows up more as irritability and anger as opposed to the more sad, depressing kind of feelings, cynicism, all of that. I've had this list for a long time, and just recently I added this last one. The losing yourself in mindless activity, aka endless scrolling. If you find yourself going on social media and you're just scrolling and scrolling, and suddenly 45 minutes has gone by, and you don't even know that you've done that for 45 minutes, it's probably an indicator of a degree of burnout or depletion that you're experiencing, where mentally, like, you just do not have it. You don't have it in you to do anything else except for mindless scrolling, right? So be attentive as you see these things pop up in your own lives. All right. As we wrap up this morning session, I realized that when we started out, y'all were smiling a lot more than you are now. And honestly, just thinking about all those risk factors and thinking about depletion and thinking about burnout and all of the different categories and thinking about these signs of burnout, like in and of itself, that has been depleting, right? Can I get an amen? So, it is hard. It is hard to think about those things, right? Because honestly, you're experiencing those things, but you're just getting through them. When you stop to actually think about them, when you stop to look at them on a list, when you stop to circle, it can honestly be a little overwhelming to see that and to see, wow, this is really what I'm dealing with. This is a lot. I knew it was a lot, but now I see it really is. It's a lot, right? So I just want to do a quick thing with you. As I talked about earlier, with the muscle analogy, we do our squats, and it's just like over and over and over again. And then if we just pause and allow our muscles to rest, it restores our ability to be resilient, right? So we're just going to take 2 minutes in silence. We're going to take 2 minutes in silence, and in the silence, I want to encourage you to allow your mind to rest. Okay? I want to encourage you to allow your spirit to rest. Allow your body to rest. And so I'm going to lead you into this. I'm going to monitor the 2 minutes. You don't have to worry about how much time has elapsed. I promise you it will be 2 minutes. I will lead you out of the 2 minutes, okay? And so first, just allow your body to rest. Be at a comfortable sitting position. And allow yourself to feel being held by your chair, by the floor. Allow yourself to feel yourself being held, not holding yourself up, but being held. If it's helpful to close your eyes or to gaze out a window, to allow your mind to rest, so your eyes are not taking in content, allow your mind to rest. And allow your spirit to rest. And so take a deep breath in, 2, and out, 2, 3, 4. And in, and out, and in, and out. Be still. Be still and know that I am God. You are God, and we are not. And so we choose to rest and to trust. You are God. Amen. What was that 2 minutes like? Peace. Others, how did you experience that 2 minutes? It was restorative. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very hard. Yes, yes, yes. 2 minutes can seem like an eternity, right? You're like, Jean, surely it's been more than 2 minutes. And usually that's an indication that inside our system is just running really fast, right? It can be hard to do that 2 minutes, right? Yeah. But I promise you, it really was 2 minutes. I did lead you in and lead you out, so it's total of 3 minutes, right? Go ahead. Yes.
Kind of cool to be silent together. Hard to stay there. Settling. It's remarkably long. I recently got a 1-minute sand timer, and that can be an amazing refreshment. And serene. Another one. Centering. I think I got them all.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Online people, I'm so happy that you are participating in this.
Yes.
That you've closed all those other tabs. Thank you so much. Yes, it can be hard to stay there, as we've talked about already, but I'm so glad that it's been an experience of being more centered, right? And honestly, as I opened my eyes and looked out at all of you, some of you did have a more peaceful countenance than before we started those 2-3 minutes, right? It's an amazing thing what 2 minutes of rest will do mentally, emotionally, physically, right? Didn't take a long time, literally 2-3 minutes, right? And already we moved from that space of depletion where we're thinking about all those things that I don't want to repeat because I don't want to bring you back there to resilience, one step in the direction of resilience, right? Okay. We're going to unpack, when we come back from our break, we're going to unpack how do we cultivate resilience. Okay, we talked about all of the forces that come against resilience. We've just tried this one little intervention, the 2-minute rest, that's helpful for cultivating resilience. We're going to talk about all sorts of other ways to cultivate resilience when we come back. But for now, we've got a 15-minute break, and so come back at 10:30-ish, right?
Yes, 10:30. Okay, a couple of things. Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Cheng and Gorman for this first part. So encouraging, so needed. We have snacks and fruit for you through those doors, coffee, so we want you to stay here. So help yourself to that. We will come back promptly at 10:30. I want to give you 10:32. We'll start back here at 10:30. Online folks, sorry you can't get any snacks here, online folks, but hopefully you'll get a snack, some water, get refreshed. And thank you for being here. And I just want to say thank you to Laura, who's been taking care of all the work.
Yes.
She's the person you've been communicating with.
Yes,
She's
thank you,
amazing. All the online stuff, and just making sure everything is all set done and making everything hospitable and warm for you. So thank you, Laura, so much.
Thank you, Laura.
All right. Enjoy
Yes.
10:32.
Online folks, go get a snack for real. Do not open your other tabs and start doing emails because you got 15 minutes. Please use this time to rest. See you in 15 minutes. everyone. Welcome back. So happy to see people eating and drinking. Hopefully you online people did not answer your emails and instead you got a snack as well. Because we have to fuel our bodies. We've been here for a little while already, right? So we've got to fuel our bodies. All right. If you are just joining us, welcome. We spent the morning talking about a robust definition of resilience and what that might be and what that doesn't look like. And quick summary, we talked about the resilience continuum, right? That it's not that we are either resilient or not resilient, but we function on a continuum of being more resilient or more depleted, specifically as we exercise our resilience muscles, as we use our resilience capacity, we move in the direction of depletion, and we have to intentionally do things to move in the direction of resilience, to intentionally cultivate the habits, the practices, the attitudes that will move us in the direction of resilience. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about ways to be proactive in strengthening our resilience muscles. And again, using that analogy of the muscle as resilience, proactive muscle development is like exercising, eating lean protein, taking amino acids, supplements, whatever, right? Proactive things that we can do. But we also need to focus on the interventions that need to be put in place when we find ourselves in spaces of depletion, when our muscles are tired and they need rest, or maybe we've injured them and we need physical therapy. We're going to talk about both approaches in cultivating resilience, both the proactive, preventative, as well as the intervention. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so the question is, when we talk about resilience muscles, what are the specific muscles that we're talking about, right? Yeah, and I use those muscle groups because honestly, the expression of resilience can come in all sorts of different ways. And so just taking the muscle group of spirituality, for example, to have resilience in our relationship with God means that we do have a theology, a theodicy that enables us to experience the evil in our world and the hardship in our world and still remain connected with God, right? Or resilience in the area of emotional regulation means that we can actually experience the natural emotions of being disappointed, for example, but it doesn't cause us to spiral down into a place of self-doubt and discouragement or whatever it might be, right? So the list that I gave you earlier, of the what's resilience, this is really a very comprehensive description of the different types of specific muscles, if you would, that resilience might involve. And the muscle groupings are more like the categories of where we might find expression of resilience. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, before we begin, any other questions on what we just talked about earlier? Okay. Okay, well, let's get to it then. We are going to talk first about some external boundaries. So first, we're going to focus first on the intervention pathways. When we're experiencing depletion, we're going to focus on the intervention pathways, okay? And then we'll end with the more proactive approaches to cultivating resilience. So the first thing we're going to talk about are boundaries. And if you think about the analogy of the squats that we did, boundaries are really about rest. Boundaries are really about setting limitations, right? And the first boundary that we're going to talk about is time. So, how many of you observe a Sabbath day, a weekly Sabbath day? Would love to see a show of hands and chat people. Yeah, I'd say maybe a quarter of the people in the room, something like that, right? And I start with the Sabbath because this, believe it or not, is in the 10 Commandments. so that's where we're going to start, okay, with the idea that we don't have 7 days to get all our work done. We're not actually supposed to work for 7 days. One of those days is actually supposed to be Sabbath rest, right? And, Gene, that's so Old Testament. So, well, it's kind of New Testament too, right? The reason why people got so upset with Jesus in healing on the Sabbath was because in all other respects, he observed the Sabbath, right? It wasn't just a cultural thing. He was human too. Sabbath is a day of rest. It's a day of physical rest. It's a day of mental rest, a day of emotional rest. It's a day, honestly, for us to remember that we are not God. We are not God. God is God and we are not God. He is infinite, we are finite, and the Sabbath day is a day to remember that God is in charge and we are not, right? That God can do all things and we cannot, right? And so when you begin to prioritize a Sabbath day in your week, it reorders the rest of your week. Because you realize I don't actually have 7 days to do all of my work. So I have to do all of my work in 6 days. But actually I can't do all of my work in 6 days because, I got to go to the grocery store and, get my laundry done, and I've got so many errands, and the kids have soccer games, and okay, so it's really more like 5 days a week that I'm going to have to work. That doesn't seem right. So having worked with so many pastors, the idea of, a work week that's not 7 days for many pastors is like mind blowing, right? So, but we were created with the idea that we would Sabbath for a day, whether or not you're a pastor or anything else. The idea of taking a Sabbath is a starting point. If you don't currently take a Sabbath, I would encourage you to start with a half day a week. Because quite honestly, it's a little overwhelming to just start taking a whole day off a week. Start with half a day, okay? And maybe it's sundown, Friday until Saturday afternoon, something like that. And in that Sabbath time, you are not working literally or mentally, not composing emails, right? Not working literally or mentally, and you're engaging in things that would be restorative in your relationship with God and in general. Maybe enjoying the outdoors, having a nice meal with friends, whatever it might be, right? Lots of different ways to enjoy the Sabbath. That could be a whole nother topic in and of itself. But the idea is to start with prioritizing your time, setting boundaries on your time, and recognizing you do not have 7 days to work. You have maybe 6, more like 5, something like that, right? And it really is a game changer to begin to order your time in that way. One of the things that I've seen increasingly in terms of time management is people increasingly are using an email autoresponder or a tagline underneath their signature line that says, I only read emails on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And again, for some people, this is like, what? You only read emails on Tuesdays and Thursdays? But you can literally consume an entire day just responding to emails. And it has nothing to do with any of the things you plan to do that day, right? So setting boundaries and your time may not just be the Sabbath, it may be what you're devoting your time to in the course of a work week, right? How many of you work part-time? Okay, quite a few of you. Yeah, and online too, I know quite a few of you, right? And let's just be honest, shall we? Okay, part-time work is really just full-time work, but you're being paid part-time. That's really what it is most of the time, right? Unless we set time boundaries to actually work the amount of hours we are paid for, right? Gene, I'm only paid for 10 hours, but I'm the youth pastor at our church. We have 45 youth. I'm like, can I have a conversation with your board? Because this is not going to work, right? So setting time boundaries around our part-time jobs is really hard. Having done it really my whole ministry career, it's really hard. And we don't need to make this too hard on ourselves. The easiest way to do it is to use an app. Okay, so there is a specific app that I use that's called Hours Tracker. It's a little blue pig in a clock. You can find it on, the App Store. And basically what it makes you do is it makes you clock in and clock out. And so you set your categories of whatever the work is that you're going to be doing in the course of your job. And when you're about to work, you find the category, you clock in. When you finish working, you clock out. And when I was working in a church part-time, literally 10 hours a week, doing all adult ministry, I was working more than 10 hours a week. And my husband was telling me I was working more than 10 hours a week. And I was like, no, I think it's about 10. It really was not. As I was clocking in and clocking out, I realized, wow, this is really a lot more than 10 hours a week. But what I did was I started to use it proactively and realized, okay, I'm only going to work 15 hours. Getting paid for 10, volunteering for 5, I'm working 15 hours. And I'm clocking in, clocking out, and by Tuesday, I've worked 13 hours, right? I still have the rest of the week to go. This is not gonna work. I have to pace myself in the hours that I'm doing. And some weeks I literally had to say, like, okay, I know it's Wednesday, but I've already worked 20 hours, and so I need to just stop for this week. Yep. It's called Hours Tracker. Hours Tracker. It's a little blue pig with a clock face. Yeah. And there are other ones, but that's the one that I use. Yeah. Okay. So boundaries around time, Sabbath day, limiting the time that you spend on certain types of activities, work, relationships even. Using apps and other things to help you track your time. Okay, the next category I want to talk about for an external boundary is input, okay? And what I mean by external boundary is really the idea that other people are going to be able to notice that you've set a boundary, okay? We're going to talk about internal boundaries that are really, within yourself that others might not notice so much, but for now, these are really external boundaries. So, boundary on input, and what I mean by input is what you take in, what you allow yourself to take in, and we recognize like your brain actually responds to what you see, right? So my Instagram feed for a long time was all surfing videos and animal rescue videos, okay? And it was so sweet because the animals all got rescued, but the animals were in distress at the beginning of the videos. And I realized eventually, I'm like, why am I watching these videos? Do I need to see these distressed animals? No, it makes me so sad. Let me go back to my surfing videos, right? So what you take in actually matters. And those things that you scroll past really quickly even on your Instagram feed or Facebook or whatever it is, actually, your brain actually responds to that. You might instantaneously have a fight, flight, freeze response because you've seen something somewhat traumatic on that screen before it gets to the rescue, whatever it is, right? It's what we take in visually, it's what we pay attention to, what the shows we watch, all of that. It's also what we allow our brains to hold. And so sometimes something will happen, someone will say something to us that's maybe critical or negative or something like that, and we just play it over in our heads over and over and over again. And that person probably doesn't even remember that they said anything to us. But meanwhile, we've played it over in our heads 50 bazillion times, right? That's input. That's what we're holding within ourselves. That is causing us to have our resilience depleted, okay? How we allow people to talk to us. The culture of our nation has become such that it is acceptable to be extremely rude. And it didn't always used to be like that, right? Just because the culture is shifting that way doesn't mean that we have to allow that for ourselves and in our own life, right? So boundaries in what we're willing to receive in someone else's treatment of us, even if, others might find it to be acceptable in our culture. Okay, next external boundary is priorities. Okay, have you ever seen that exercise where there's a glass jar full of rocks and pebbles and sand, and they dump out the jar, and it's this big old pile of rocks and pebbles and sand, and then you try to put all that stuff back in the jar, and it doesn't fit. There's too much stuff. The only way it fits is if you put the big rocks in first, and then you put the pebbles, and then you pour the sand in, and the sand fills in all the little cracks, right? And so this is what I mean by priorities. One of the boundaries that we set are establishing our priorities, literally having our priorities. Because sometimes we just go through our day not having any priorities, and we just respond to all the emails that came in and all the things that people are asking of us, whatever's on our schedule, thing after thing, and we're really driven by the tyranny of the urgent, right? Instead of identifying what our priorities are. And I want to encourage you to think about identifying priorities that fall within this spot right here, this sweet spot, okay? And so As I said, sometimes we prioritize our attention and our energies based on the needs of the setting, like what people are asking of us, all the emails that are coming in, right? We prioritize based on our job responsibilities, what we know we need to do because they hired us to teach, they hired us to care, they hired us to lead, whatever it might be, right? But there's also the things that are important to me, and the things that I love, and the reasons why I went into ministry, and the reasons why I went into being a therapist, right? That's my personal gifting. Those things are important to me. And even beyond that, there's this sense of calling. Like, I really believe God has called me to this role, to this time, to this space for a purpose, right? Those are priorities, right? All of those things, we're going to talk about agency in a second, all of those things are personal gifting and calling, job responsibilities, needs of the setting. All of those elements can help define what our priorities would be, right? And ideally, we would have aspects of our own personal gifting and calling that would match with our job responsibilities and the needs of our setting, right? And we would have agency over this. And by agency, what I mean is you have some degree of control. You have some degree of setting what you, how you do things and what you do. It's not just foisted upon you. It's not just determined for you, right? So the ideal priorities to have would be the convergence of these multiple aspects, these three circles, that you would have priorities that you feel like you have some degree of control over, where you're gifted and you have a sense of calling, and it meets the needs of the setting, okay? I will give you an example of a time in my life where it didn't match, okay? So if you remember in the beginning when I introduced myself, I said I'm a psychologist, a pastor, and a spiritual director. And when I first started out in ministry, it was a church plant. And what we needed at the church plant, when I was first called into ministry, I was leading worship, but what we needed was someone who would oversee all Sunday morning ministries and to plan all church events, because that's the way that we were doing outreach with all church events. Whether it was for the youth and raising, fundraisers or outreach events to the community with different activities, that was my job. I was an event planner. I could do it because I have strong administrative skills, right? But after a year and a half of that, I completely burned down. Part of that was because I couldn't set the events. The events were determined, by my pastor and said, here's the event our church is going to do. Go ahead and plan this. I had no agency, right? And personal gifting and calling, administrative skills, but I am a pastor, a psychologist, a spiritual director. Event planning is not my jam. This doesn't fill my soul, right? Even though it absolutely met the needs of the setting and my job responsibilities, right? I was very much in this sphere. I was not in that sweet spot because of these other things, right? So the question is, as you look at your jobs, as you look at the roles that you play, how much of what you're doing in terms of your top priorities actually fall into this sweet spot? Or how much of it falls outside in those other spheres? If you, like in the example I just gave, are really functioning outside of that sweet spot, for whatever reason, not your gifting and calling, not the needs of the city, whatever it might be, agency, the degree of depletion that you will experience is going to be pretty high, right? So can you think of one priority? Can you think of one priority that fits your sweet spot? Okay, and this might be work, but it might not be work. Okay, let's say you're a working mom, right? I've been working mom for many, many, many years, right? There's certainly space in that sweet spot for that priority, right? That would get crowded out because of the needs of my job, right? And the needs of ministry. So prioritizing my role as a mom, really helped me to find a greater degree of personal resilience, right? So can you think of a priority that falls in that sweet spot? Just 30 seconds, real quick. Give yourself some space to think about that. And online folks, same with you. And if you can think of one, just throw it into the chat. Okay, a couple people. Just name what a priority is for you that falls into that sweet spot. Interfaith dialogue. Nice. Others. Mm-hmm.
My best friend.
Time with my best friend.
Online. Tony.
Okay. Yeah, that's a life priority, right? Yeah. Others? Leading a small group. Yeah. Yeah. Great. I'm looking at the others of you. I see a lot of furrowed brows. I'm going to guess online too, and having done this before, this is kind of a tough one to think about priorities, especially if you go through your day like as a therapist, scheduled with various appointments. It's kind of hard to think about like what would a priority be, right? So I would just say, having worked as a therapist and partnered with a lot of therapists, one of the ways that a priority can be formed is the idea of thinking about what you feel most passionate about in helping others, where you feel you're most gifted, and how that finds expression in your practice. So, for example, one of the folks that I worked with all the time said, I'm a therapist for adults. I see a lot of people with depression and anxiety and relationships and all of that. But, the people that I really love to come alongside are pastors. I really love to come alongside pastors. And so we talked about cultivating a practice focused on helping pastors. And that really gave him, honestly, many more years of being a therapist than just kind of having no control, no agency over whoever walked into his office. Yeah.
Just
Question?
a couple of more people online
Yeah.
who wanted to share. Writing, Dr. Gilliard,
Nice.
Pam, meaningful connection with close friends. Lisa, finishing seminary, master's degree, whoop, whoop, not dropping out or taking a break. And mindfulness by Yvonne.
Great. I love the variety of personal priorities, right? Wonderful to have those priorities named so that you begin to structure your time and your day around those priorities, right? For pastors, sometimes this can be difficult to think about priorities as well. They're like, Jean, I have so much to do, you don't even know. And trust me, I actually do know. It is hard to set priorities when you're just going from thing to thing. I talked with a pastor recently who said, I spent a lot of time on sermon prep and I'm leading my staff. I got to figure out the budget and all of that. But what I really love is I just love visitation. I just love, when I was pastor in a smaller church, going and sitting in people's homes and spending time with them. But I just don't get to do that because I've got to, manage this staff and whatever. And what I would say is, well, actually, you do get to do that. Because you're the lead pastor of this church, you have agency, you have a staff team, you get to structure your staff team in such a way so that you do get to sit in your sweet spot. It is a need of your congregation to have the pastor visit them. It is your deep desire, and you do have agency over that, right? For other people, they're like, oh my gosh, Jean, I don't want to do any visitation, but I have to do so much. So it can be different based on your needs, based on your setting. But the idea is to find priorities that hit the sweet spot. The more you can find, the better. But at least try to find one. Okay, try to find one to begin to, again, set the boundaries for your energy and your capacity, right? To focus your best energy on those big rocks that go in the jar first, those priorities, right? Okay. One more external boundary. We talked about time, input,
Jean,
priorities.
sorry,
Oops,
a slide. Someone on the online, can you show the slide again? I guess that's what you're doing.
This one?
I guess that one. Yep, they wanted to see it.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and honestly, if I was very tech savvy, I would have put motion to these little circles, and they would have like converged. Because we don't want this spot to be this teeny tiny little spot. We want this spot to be really big, right? So I'm not tech savvy, so there you go. That's what it is. All right, moving on. Yes? We're good? Okay, external boundaries, time, input, priorities. Last one, pacing. Okay. Pacing. What do I mean by pacing? Pacing is the idea that regardless of what your priorities are or your work responsibilities, that you approach them with a proper pace. There's actually different ways to pace yourself. And people are like, really? What are you talking about, Jean? So what I want you to think about is this. Jesus had 3 years to save all of humanity for all of eternity, okay? And he did not sprint the 3 years. So there's 4 different types of pacing I want to talk with you about. Sprint, which I just named, rest, running, and jogging and walking, okay? An example of sprinting would be Mark 6:31, where Jesus says to his disciples, "Come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while, for there were many people coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat." That is sprinting. So much going on. But as you can see, Jesus followed sprinting with rest. Come away by yourselves and rest a while, right? Because there's so many people coming and going, you did not even have time to eat. So sprinting and resting. Here's an example of running. In Luke chapter 9, as the time approached for Jesus to be taken up into heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem, and he sent messengers on ahead of him. They went to a village and entered the village of the Samaritans to make arrangements for him. And then we see this sequence of events from during the last week: the triumphal entry, clearing of the temple, cursing the fig tree, teaching in the temple, the Olivet Discourse, the Last Supper, betrayal, crucifixion. It's one thing after another, after another, after another. It's running, right? It's constant motion, not in a sprinting, like a burst of activity, right? But it's ongoing engagement of one thing after another, okay? I have a favorite passage in the Old Testament that comes out of Numbers. It says this: "At the command of the Lord, the sons of Israel would set out. At the command of the Lord, they would camp. As long as the cloud settled over the tabernacle, they remained camped. And whether it was 2 days or a month or a year, that cloud lingered over the tabernacle, staying above it. The sons of Israel remained camped and did not set out. But when it was lifted, they did set out. At the command of the Lord, they camped. At the command of the Lord, they set out." They kept the Lord's charge. The idea there being that there's an alternating of jogging and resting. And jogging is just that ongoing forward movement toward a long-term goal, but not with the intensity of running one thing right after the other, but just kind of an ongoing, a steady forward movement, a little bit at a time, right? So sprinting, resting, running, jogging, and walking. What is the pace of your life? What is the pace of your job and your ministry? What does it feel like to you? I once worked with the church staff, and I had them chart out their yearly ministry focus and responsibilities. You know, there was obviously Lent and Advent in there, but there was the fall launch and, the VBS and, all sorts of things. I had them chart out their work focus and responsibilities, and then I had them color code it. And I said, color code the periods where you are sprinting in yellow, color code the parts where you are running. It's kind of one thing after another, but it's more relaxed. It's not an intense sprint. Color code the periods of rest that you have, put those in blue. Color code the jogging, the walking, the forward motion in a long-term goal kind of thing. And and I had them all do it on one Google Doc. And it came back to me, and the whole thing was solid yellow, right? It was just sprinting the whole year. I'm like, and I said, like, do I even need to say anything here? I mean, like, and they're like, okay, no, wait. I take a vacation a year. Boop, there's a little blue, right? But honestly, that's what it was like for them. And that was the reason why I was working with them, was because they were all burning out, because they were all operating at a sprint pace literally the entire year. And we are not made to sprint the entire year. There's that great verse about, running the race so that in such a way so that we would get the prize. It's out of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians. Run the race in such a way so that you would get the prize, right? That doesn't mean sprint the whole time. You cannot sprint a marathon. We have to pace ourselves and run the race in such a way, pacing, to get the prize, right? So think about how you pace yourself and see if you can shift your pacing for your work and your in your personal life. Right? Spaces where you can introduce rest, spaces where you can slow yourself down, still moving forward, still jogging, you're still going in the right direction, but you're slowing yourself down. And, and I would say this, if you don't slow yourselves down, and you know that you've been sprinting and you've been sprinting for a long time, God might slow you down all by himself. And I have experienced this, unfortunately, many times, where I sense God saying to me, Jean, slow down. I'm like, I got it. Slow down. Yeah, okay. Slow. After this one thing is slow. And usually the way that God helps me to slow down is through injury. Anybody else had that experience before? Yep, right? So Rabbi Abraham Heschel talks about injury as forced rest. And sadly, I've had that experience many times where God says, I told you to slow down. I know you're having a hard time. Let me just help you out. Let's just have you lie down for a little bit because you can't actually move now because you've ruptured a disc in your back. And that's going to slow you down. And once you slow down, you can start with a better pace coming back, right? So I encourage you to think about your pacing and how you might be able to take control of that and slow down. You don't have to maybe send that last email or the last burst of emails at 10 p.m. You can actually stop sprinting, you can rest, pick that up again the next day, right? Okay, so going back to our 4 external boundaries, here we go. Time, input, priorities, pacing. Here's my big tip. I am a pastor, right? So here's my big tip for you for your external boundaries, TIPP, time, input, priorities, and pacing, all right? All right. Any questions about that before we talk about internal boundaries?
Just a quick comment online. Tony says, taking naps, rest is resistance.
Yes. Rest is resistance and resilience too. Yes, thanks, Tony. Yeah, any other comments or questions? Yeah.
Could you go back to your example of the?
Yes.
I'm curious, looking back, what happened to your agency? Was it intact at the beginning and it slowly drained away by the demands of your responsibilities, or I'm curious about that?
Yeah, so a question about the example that I gave where I became an event planner for our church as I first started into ministry and what happened to my agency there. And truthfully, in the beginning, I just didn't have any agency. I didn't know any better. I was just responding to the needs of the setting and what the church needed for a staff member. It was my first experience in ministry. Like, I just didn't even know. And and then when I burned out and talked to my pastor, and he was like, I don't think this is the right role for you, but you're the right person. So let's see if we can figure out a different role for you. And that began a conversation around agency and thinking about what am I gifted for? Where would my best contribution be? The church's needs had changed at that point, and what what could I best contribute in a different role? Yeah, thanks. Okay, let's talk about some internal boundaries. And remember what I said earlier, the external boundaries are boundaries that are pretty visible to other people. Like if you stop working 7 days a week, people are going to notice that, right? So internal boundaries are what's happening within you that people may or may not notice, but you will notice, okay? And the first internal boundary that I want to talk about is about your attitude. Your attitudes towards life, your attitudes towards work, your attitudes towards yourself. There are attitudes that we hold that can be helpful to us in our resilience, and there are attitudes that we can hold that are not helpful, that might even destroy the boundaries that we decide we want to put up. And the first attitude that is not helpful is what I call infinitude. We think that we can do it all, have it all, and be it all. And I would say this, there's also another great song about that, particularly if you're a woman, right? You can fry up your bacon in a pan and all that. And there is this idea, especially I think for working women, that you really can have it all, do it all, and be it all. You can be an excellent employee, staff person, therapist, whatever it is at work, and you can be a stellar mom, volunteering in the PTA, engaged in your children's activities, all of that, and you can be, invested in your friendships and a good family member taking care of your parents. Like you can have it all. If there's a husband in there, oh yeah, right, great relationship. We go on dates all the time. We can have it all, do it all, and be it all, because that's what it means to be a woman, right? Well, this is not a helpful attitude to have. And I will tell you that I absolutely held this attitude for a long time. It didn't occur to me that I couldn't actually do it all, have it all, and be it all. Because when I was called into ministry, I was the mom of 3 young children. And so started going to seminary, started working in a church, and had my 3 children. I was already super involved in their education and in their lives, PTA mom, the whole thing. I used to make their birthday piñatas by hand. Okay, and all 3 of my children are born in February, but we had separate birthday parties for each of them based on their interests. So it was a shark piñata, and then a horse piñata, and a teapot piñata. Let me tell you, I could do it all. But I really couldn't. I was burning myself out, honestly, trying to be, an amazing seminary student, staff worker, mom, engaged in school, the whole thing, right? We can't actually do it all because we are not God. We're really not. God is God and we are not. There is nobody else of infinite capacity. No one, not me, not you, no one else has infinite capacity. We all have finite capacity, but we kind of pretend that we don't, right? So many times we kind of pretend that I can do that additional meeting. I can take on that additional project. Oh, they need this other, yeah, I could do that too. We pretend as if we have infinite capacity, but we really don't, right? So the attitude of infinitude. We have the attitude of fear. We do it all, have it all, be it all, or else something bad might happen. And Jean, don't you know that if I don't do this, nobody's going to do it, and that's going to be really bad because nobody does this, this is going to happen, and right? Some of us carry almost a generalized anxiety about people in our lives or our work situation or whatever it might be, and a sense of dread and responsibility that if we don't do it, if we don't put in this effort, engage that activity, take on this responsibility, whatever, something bad is going to happen. We're actually afraid that something bad is going to happen. Jean, literally, don't you know there is nobody else that's going to do this? I don't do this. Yes, I do know that. That's what it feels like as if God literally had no one else but me to do this, right? No, Jean, it's really true. It's really true. There's nobody else except for me who could do. I know what that feels like. I know that fear that if we don't do it, something bad's going to happen, right? And that drives us to move beyond our capacity. It drives us to push through our limitations and to burn out, right? One more, identity. We need to do it all or have it all or be it all because of who we are. Because of who we understand ourselves to be, we feel like we need to do it all, to have it all, and be it all. And I confess I'm a stereotypical Asian overachiever, come from an immigrant background, really for many, many, many years, it existed in the kind of performance identity achievement, and I know what it's like to push myself beyond my limits because of that. So I mentioned, I was in seminary, had 3 kids, and I took the slow track in seminary, one class at a time, pushed off taking Hebrew as long as I possibly could, until I could not push it off any longer, and I had to take it during a summer session. But it was summer session, and my kids are home. My youngest was in elementary school. The 2 older ones were in high school. And so I decided, I'm going to take this class pass-fail. Because you can do that. You can take a class pass-fail. And I will still be able to be present with my kids. It's the summer, blah, 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 blah. And you know, pass fail, you only need like a 50 to pass, right? Or a 60 or a 65 or something like that. I don't really know, honestly, because I did not try to pass that class with a 50 or 60 or 65, because who can do, I mean, no, we're not going to do that. So I just did that class as if I wasn't on a pass fail grade basis. And, you know, I didn't go overboard. I wasn't getting 100% on all my assignments, you know, but, you know, I was still getting good grades. Comes around to the final, and I am stressed. I am stressed about this final. I'm trying to, like, you know, study for this and do well. My kids are watching me. They're like, "What are you doing? Aren't you taking this class pass fail?" And I'm, "Yes, but I know, but it's the final." And they're like, "Mom, what do you need to get on this test to be able to pass the class?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, you can see your grades, and you know what you've gotten, and you know how much the final is worth, so you can calculate the score that you need to get on this test to be able to pass. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have 3 graduate degrees. I have never done class like that. I have no idea what you're talking about. So they calculate it out. They're like, "Mom, you need a 32% to pass this class." And I'm like, 32%? Like, "Mom, just write your name on the paper. Like, you're totally going to pass this class." I'm like, oh my gosh, 32%? Like, I can't get a 32%. I mean, me? Like, me get 32%? What are you talking? That's identity. That is identity, when you feel like, no, I can't do it like that. I can't give it my best effort, or not, you know. That's identity. I need to do well on this. It truly did not matter what grade I got on that final, right? But I needed to do well on that, because that's who I saw myself to be. Someone who is a good student, conscientious, you know, all those things, right? So,
Jean, I just want to say, you have folks relating very well to what you're sharing.
thank you for your compassion and being with me in this. Okay.
Here.
Yeah. So we've got infinitude, fear, identity. These are all attitudes that destroy our boundaries. These are attitudes that destroy our boundaries, right? But let's go back to those real quick. What's the opposite? What is the opposite of infinitude? How would you describe the attitude that is the opposite of infinitude? Humility? Accepting limitations. Yeah. Dependence. Yes. Contentment. Yeah. In the chat too, go ahead and put some words up. Yeah.
And humility.
Yeah, humility. Right. Yeah, being humble enough to recognize our limitations, to be content with what might not be perfect, right? Yeah. Okay. What's the opposite of fear? The attitude of fear that would drive us to do it all, or else? Compassion. Surrender.
On the chat, we have temporality and trust.
Yes, trust, temporality, and trust. Yeah. Acceptance. Yeah. There is this thing called anticipatory anxiety that drives us, and it's exactly what it is. You're anticipating something bad is going to happen, and so you have anxiety about it. And in most cases, the things that we anticipate never happen. But we carry the anxiety anyway, right? But if we would trust, if we would surrender those worries and those concerns, and trust God, we don't have to live in fear, right? Yeah, maybe we would have more of a peaceful attitude. Opposite of identity, an identity that we need to do it all. What would be the opposite of that? Beloved. Yeah. Creatureliness. Yes. Beloved creatureliness. Yes. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Recognizing that God does not love us more if we get an A or if we get a 32. Right. Yeah. We are beloved children of God, right? So, thinking about the attitudes that destroy boundaries and the attitudes that we just described that help us to hold boundaries, right? That's the first internal boundary that we set for ourselves. or the first constellation. Next are expectations, and this is very close to what we just talked about. What do you expect of yourself? What do you expect of how things would go? Are there any other people in the room who are perfectionists or recovering perfectionists? Yeah. Some of you, thank you for admitting that you're with me in this, right? If you expect perfection, that's going to be really harmful and drive you to places of depletion, right? But if you can accept something that the psychoanalyst Winnicott talked about, being good enough. He talked about good enough mothering, right? The idea of being good enough. It doesn't have to be 100%. It can just be good enough. I said this to someone recently who is a very driven achiever. And I talked about, or I asked her, you know, could you do this particular aspect of your job good enough? And she looked at me, and I tell you, I swear, I could have just died based on the daggers in her. I was like, how dare you even suggest that it would just be good enough? Good enough is bad. It's bad. Us perfectionists might hold that attitude, but good enough is actually good enough, right? We don't have infinite capacity, so we cannot give 100% to everything, because that adds up to more than 100%, right? So some things we actually have to only give 50% of our effort and energy to, or 10%, or 5%, or 75%, or whatever it might be, right? Okay, expectations lead to output. What you expect of yourself in terms of perfection or being doing something good enough leads you to gauge your output and how much you invest in something emotionally, right? As therapists, we can sit with someone and be empathetic and listen to them without giving them our whole heart and being fully drawn into the pain of what they're sharing. You can actually still be a good therapist for them without fully opening the doors of your heart, right? Many of us found that we have been led to intervene in times of crisis, whether you're a pastor, whether you're a therapist, social worker, whatever it might be, right? And the truth about crises is that they are bottomless. When you find yourself in a crisis, or someone else is in a crisis, it is a bottomless situation. There was endless need for more help, for more intervention, for more care, for whatever it might be, right? And so your output in a crisis situation can't match that because it's bottomless. And you're not someone of infinite capacity. So you actually have to set an internal boundary for how much you will engage in a time of crisis, right? How many hours you're going to spend with that person, right? How much you're going to allow it to occupy your mind. And those boundaries are going to feel artificial and maybe even insensitive. Like, how could I close off my mind or heart in this, right? So when you find yourself in a crisis situation or helping others with crisis, even if the boundaries feel artificial, remember that it is wise to set those limitations on your internal capacities, your expectations, and on your output, okay? What you would give out in that situation, okay? All right, one more. Another boundary that we can set, oh, actually, let me just go back and say, in terms of output, before we do this last one, remember that as we are engaging, particularly in crisis situations or helping others, output is not just solely us. Output might be a combination of us and somebody else. We can call others into situations to help share the burden or share the load, right? That means that the 50% that you're giving is being joined by 25% by somebody else, and that's a 75% investment in this situation. That didn't come from you completely, it came from you and this other person, right? So enlisting others for help is really important in terms of managing your output, okay? All right, now let's go to growth mindset. How many of you are familiar with this concept of growth mindset? Great. I think almost all of you, maybe online too. Thankfully, it's a concept that has gotten out, in our mainstream society quite a bit since Carol Dweck first talked about it in 1999. But quick review, the idea is that we can operate from a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And a fixed mindset really begins with the idea that there is a fixed amount, a fixed capacity, a fixed ability, a fixed degree of intelligence, whatever that might be, right? And because of that, we have to act in ways that preserve that fixed capacity, right? So if intelligence, for example, is a fixed capacity and we meet some sort of challenge, we're going to avoid that challenge, give up because our efforts don't make any difference because it's a fixed amount, right? I'm just not that smart. I'm just not that smart. So it doesn't matter if I try or not because I'm just not that smart, and might ignore feedback that could help us grow, might feel threatened because of this situation that seems beyond my ability, my fixed ability, and as a result, pull out, give up, right? That's a fixed mindset. In contrast, a growth mindset embraces the idea that we can grow. We can grow our capacities, we can grow our intelligence, we can grow our abilities, right? And because we know that we can grow, when a challenge comes up, we can embrace it as an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to shape our thinking, our way of experiencing things, our understanding, our abilities, all of that. And because we know that we can grow through challenge, we can persist, even though it feels like we might be having a setback, right? Effort makes all the difference because we're going to try. We're going to try to grow, even though we don't know exactly how to do this, and we're just trying to learn. And we can learn from the feedback that we get from criticism and critique, and find lessons and inspiration in others who are learning and growing as well. And as a result, again, this is secular, reach ever higher levels of achievement and give a greater sense of free will, right? Or I'm just going to say well-being. Well-being, okay? When we have a growth mindset, when we encounter difficulties and challenges, it's not I'm going to be successful or I'm going to fail. I'm going to be resilient or I'm not going to be resilient mindset. The mindset is whatever happens in this situation, I'm going to grow from this. I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to change from this, right? This situation almost took me out. But I realize now that I have to pay attention to my physical well-being, because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to be emotionally resilient. I've learned that now, right? That's a growth mindset, okay? And as we adopt a growth mindset, it enables us, again, to be more resilient, right? These are internal boundaries that we set for ourselves that help us to think and approach situations with greater resilience. And quick summary, this is what it's all about. As we think about these internal boundaries, it's about heeding and knowing and heeding our own limitations, about establishing our priorities and our appropriate pacing, managing our output, enlisting others for support and help, adopting helpful attitudes, that growth mindset I talked about, reasonable expectations, being diligent about your own self-care. We'll get to that, okay? But you know how I said earlier that I had that big tip for you for the external boundaries? I don't really have one for the internal ones. It's like A, attitudes, expectations, E, output, O, growth mindset, G. It's like, yeah. That's all I've got for you. I got nothing. So this is just the summary right here of what we've just talked about. Okay, any questions before we talk about self-care? Any questions about these internal boundaries, these attitudes, growth mindset, expectations, output? Any questions or comments, either in the chat or here in.
I'm struck by this idea of that, like, there's crises are bottomless. Maybe for clarification, it's truly like people in crisis won't have enough support that they need, and so we can kind of limit the support that we can get, knowing that that's true.
Yeah, Okay, so the question is about the idea of crises being bottomless, right? And so, yes, in some situations, when I say the crises are bottomless, it's because people don't have enough support and they just need more and more and more support. And because of that, we need to gauge how much support we can give and calling others into that, right? But what I also mean by bottomless is that because it's a crisis situation, it transcends the boundaries of our normal experience. Right? And because of that, the emotional investment that the person in crisis is experiencing, it transcends our normal boundaries. And so the anxiety that you might feel on a normal daily basis in a crisis is, maybe it's this much in a normal daily basis. In a crisis, it's like this, right? Or the distress or the fear, discouragement, whatever it might be, right? On a normal daily basis, it might be in a crisis. Right? So as we walk with people who are in crisis or as we approach crisis ourselves, understanding that it's bottomless, there's no limits to it. Like you could talk to this person for an hour, you could talk to them for 3 hours, you could talk to them for 5 hours, you could talk to them for 10 hours, right? The need is bottomless because it transcends the normal experience, right? But we can't actually give 10 hours of time to each person in crisis, right? Because we, again, are finite beings, right? Does that help? Yeah. Okay, good question. Yeah.
I have a question online.
Yeah.
How important is it to have an executive coach or spiritual director?
Oh, thank you to whoever asked that question. Chuck, bless you. So, right, we talk about the idea of, we're going to talk about self-care and all of that. But in terms of enlisting others for support and help, this is a huge piece in resilience. So remember when I had that slide where we talked about what resilience is not? And one of the things that resilience is not is a solo effort, right? Again, we are made in the image of God, relational beings. We are not meant to go through life by ourselves. And so enlisting the support of others is absolutely essential in cultivating our own resilience, and it's a big part of our self-care. We're going to talk about that. Spiritual directors, fantastic. Therapists, fantastic. Mentors, fantastic. I'm just going to mention the ministry that I lead because it's also fantastic. But I lead a ministry called Rooted.Grow.Resilient, and it's a team of 40 amazing coaches, spiritual directors, mentors, seasoned pastors, and leaders who commit to walking alongside someone for 6 months, and really helping to cultivate, resilience, growth, spiritual rootedness, rootedness in their vocation over the course of that 6 months. And it's just so helpful to have someone in your life, whether it's a mentor or friend, RGR partner, spiritual director, coach, someone who's pouring into you, right? Who is not extracting from you the whole time, right? But is actually pouring in and restoring as you're giving out. Yeah, so important. Thank you, Chuck. All right, other questions? Yeah.
So is something like having grit kind of related to growth mindset, or would you say that kind of brings a different angle or different challenges?
You said grit?
Yeah, having grit.
Yeah. So the question is, is having grit something like akin to growth mindset or resilience? And I think grit is a helpful word when we think about just the ability to withstand difficulties and to push through hardship. I personally don't use the word grit because it has a little bit of that flavor of like, you just gotta grin and bear it and like get through this. If you had grit, you could pull yourself up by the bootstraps and you could do this, right? So I personally don't use that word because of that connotation. And for me, it's more about growing and developing, right? And so, grit, I think, sometimes carries that connotation of like you either have it or you don't, right? You're either getting to like have grit or you don't. Whereas resilience, growth mindset is the idea that you can continue to grow in your capacity for resilience no matter where you are on the continuum, whether you're totally depleted or, mostly resilient, you can continue to grow. Yeah, that's a good question.
So in our ministry context, would you advise us to not use that language? Would you also do that?
I personally don't use that language. I really try to cultivate the idea of resilience being a continuum and really growing wherever you are on the continuum and finding yourself along the continuum, taking steps, concrete steps toward the direction of resilience as opposed to depletion. But some people, some people resonate with that word. And when we talked earlier about what does resilience look like on a practical level, what does it look like? For some people, that word grit might actually capture the emotional resilience, that some of those other descriptors described of courage and conviction. Yeah. So it could definitely be helpful in some contexts. Yeah, great question. Other questions, comments before we move to self-care?
I think the people we work for and with love the idea of us having boundaries. They just don't like us having boundaries. So, can you speak to that a little bit?
Great question. The question was, people that we work for, they love the idea of us having boundaries, but they really don't love the idea of us having boundaries. And it is true. It is true. That church that I talked about, where I had them color code their pacing, and it was literally all yellow, they brought me in to work with them because they knew they were burning out. And I told them, you need to set some boundaries for your time and your pacing. They're like, great idea. We got so much to do, Jean. So the culture that we live and function in can, in and of itself, destroy our best efforts to set boundaries, right? And so it's actually so helpful if you can help shape your culture in this direction as well. If you have the capacity to take a Sabbath day and to communicate your Sabbath day, right? It's on your email tagline. I don't work on Fridays. Friday is my Sabbath day. And maybe you work with a staff team and a ministry team where that's what everybody does on Friday. So everybody knows we don't schedule meetings on Friday, right? If you have the capacity to communicate your boundaries and to encourage other people to experiment with boundaries as well, shifting the culture in which you're working can make a big difference, because otherwise it is very hard to be the only one trying to set boundaries and have other people, not honor those boundaries or affirm those boundaries, and that leads to all sorts of other things. Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else before we move to self-care? Yeah.
Kind of along those same lines, the expectations, and talking about being good enough. But then probably all of our organizations or ministries or churches, one of our core values is excellence. So that, because who's going to write a core value of good enough?
Yeah.
But then how does that play out practically?
Yes.
When I'm going to just get good enough and not
Yeah.
excellence?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, many churches, ministries have a stated value of excellence. And so where does good enough fit within all of that? So I will tell you that the first church that I was a part of on staff, and it was a stated value. Excellence was absolutely expected in everything that we did. And there was a drivenness because of that, right? You couldn't just do, quote unquote, good enough. And the church that I'm in part of now, that is not actually a stated value. The stated value is growth. One of the stated values is growth. And so one of the things that I do at this church is I lead a ministry called Intergenerational Justice Initiatives, and it's our de facto student ministry. So rather than having traditional youth ministry, we have intergenerational justice initiatives. And on a quarterly basis, I gather a team of students and a few adults, and we lead Sunday service, focused on a particular justice issue. So we lead Sunday service, and then we do some sort of service event related to that. Human trafficking, racism, poverty, all sorts of things, right? Did you hear me say that I am leading Sunday service with a bunch of teenagers who are preaching the message, who are leading events? Did you hear me say that? Right? This is not a place where excellence is going to help us as a stated value. But I'm so grateful for our church and the value of growth and the willingness of the congregation to say, hey, we're investing in these teenagers' spiritual growth and in their leadership growth. And yeah, that was a pretty messy service. And yeah, we can't read anything on those slides because the font is too small, right? But we're going to give grace to allow them to grow, right? And to allow us as a congregation to grow as a result of that, right? So excellence is a wonderful value, right? Growth is also a wonderful value. And so it might be worth just having a conversation in your ministry context. What does this really mean, this value of excellence? Are we actually talking about perfection? Is there room for growth in a stated value of excellence? Great. Okay. All right. I know that you all have to need to go to lunch soon, so let's do this. Let's talk about self-care, okay? And what I have for you is a self-care assessment. Sorry, folks online, I do not have. Yes, we'll send you the PDF, but this is a quick summary of the categories. This is actually a secular resource from Therapist Aid. And what it asks you to do is to think through these different areas of self-care: physical, psychological, emotional, social, spiritual, and professional, okay? And it looks like this, with a bunch of different items under each section, okay? And it asks you to think about, I do this rarely or not at all, I do this sometimes, I do this often, or I'd like to do this more frequently. I'm not going to actually have you do this now. I want you to take it home and really think through it. But if you would, just glance through it and notice the items in the different categories, right? So for those of you online, I'll just name a few. In the physical self-care realm, we've got obviously exercise, eating regularly, getting enough sleep, resting when you're sick. We also have participating in fun activities like walking, swimming, dancing, sports. Okay, that's physical self-care. Psychological, emotional self-care. We've got learning new things, going on vacations, finding reasons to laugh, talking about my problems, expressing my feelings in a healthy way. Social self-care, spending time with people that I like, meeting new people, asking other people for help. Spiritual self-care, praying, meditating, spending time in nature. Professional self-care, improving my professional skills. There's a whole bunch of them. Improving my professional skills, taking on new projects that are interesting, taking breaks from work. All sorts of different expressions of these different areas of self-care. As you just glance over those areas and think through these categories, I want to ask you to think about, what area are you already strongest in? An area that you've already paid attention to and have made some commitments in. We're not going for excellence here, okay? We're just going for, like, I know about this area, and I've tried to do some things in this area. Okay, show of hands. How many of you feel like physical self-care is your strongest area? 1, 2, okay, online 2, all right, 3, good, all right. How about psychological, emotional self-care? Hands, good. We've got 3, 4, something like that. All right, social self-care. 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Okay, spiritual self-care. There we go. There's all the hands.
Got a couple of physicals too online.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, lots of spiritual self-care, something that we've been attentive to as disciples, right? What about professional self-care? I have no hands for professional self-care. Well, fantastic. Okay. So that honestly is very similar to, when I've done this in other places. Professional self-care is kind of a new thing, like, that's a self-care thing? Professional self-care? Yes, that's a self-care category, right? Not surprised that spiritual self-care is something that we're already really attentive to, and physical self-care, not as much, okay? But we are physical beings. If anybody noticed that, we're actually physical beings. It actually makes a difference if you sleep or if you don't. Right? And all those other things, actually, if you're not sleeping, it's going to be really hard to cultivate resilience in those other areas. So all of these things really matter. As you go through the self-care assessment, think about the area that you're already attentive to and areas that maybe you're not attentive to at all. And what I would encourage you to do is, like, this asks you to name, like, I would like to do this more frequently. And maybe you're going to check like 49 things on here. don't do that. Just pick one. Just pick one, right? One place to start. Maybe it's the area you're already strongest in. Maybe it's an area that you want to try that's completely new, okay? All right. Self-care commitments are another way of thinking about that is what I call the 5 R's: rest, restoration, relationships, recreation, and resources. Rest is rest. It's stopping. It's sleep. It's boundaries, right? Setting those limitations. Restoration is about filling up, pouring in, other people pouring into you, doing enjoyable things that help to restore your relationship with God and your sense of self. Relationships, we talked a little bit about that, both the professional relationships that might be helpful to you, as well as friends. Not just places where you are giving in relationships, but places where you are receiving in relationships, right? Recreation. Does anybody remember what recreation is? This is one where people are like, what is that? Way long time ago, when you were kids, you used to play. And maybe some point in your adult life, you had a regular habit of play. But this is one of those things that easily disappears when things get busy and we become responsible adults, right? But recreation, play, and adventure, particularly adventure, new things, new discoveries, new places, can be extremely restorative. There's no shortcut to coming back from burnout. There is no shortcut. You have to intentionally move in that direction. But prioritizing recreation, particularly play and adventure, quick start that process. Okay, if you're going to do anything to come back from burnout, quick starting recreation makes a huge difference. Lastly, resources. We talked about this a little bit with the RGR partners, therapists, spiritual directors, coaches. Not a solo venture. Resilience is not a solo venture, right? And so one of the 5 R's for self-care is resources. If you are the only person paying attention to your self-care, please focus on this category and begin to think about who are the other people that can pour into you, okay? All right. Elizabeth, I just want to check on our timing. Are we going to lunch right about now? Yes. All right. Let me wrap up with this then. Okay. What I'd like you to do is these are all the things we talked about, so many things. What I'd like you to do is over lunch, put together a plan. This is your resilience plan, okay? And as you'll see on this side, we just talked about rest, restoration, relationships, recreation, resources. Here are the things that we talked about a little bit earlier: expectations, boundaries, different aspects of burnout, priorities, pacing. Would love for you to think about what your plan is. And here's the plan. The plan is to pick one of these things, okay? Pick one of these areas to identify a concrete step that you can begin now, today, this week, something like that, to move in the direction of resilience. If you are completely burned out and need to take a year to recover from burnout, I would walk you through this plan and we would make a comprehensive plan for the year, okay? But for now, I just want you to think about one step. Remember that continuum? Right? You got to the depletion by running too fast. Right? As we move in the direction of resilience, we're just taking one step at a time. We're just taking one step at a time. So over lunch, we'd love for you to have a conversation with God, honestly, and with each other, and to think about what is your one step in your one area that you can do to move in the direction of resilience. Right? Okay. All right. Let me end with this. There are no shortcuts to this process. There are no shortcuts to this process. This really does require intentionality. But there is this really great technique called cyclic or physiological sighing. And it's a way of starting with your physiology to calm your body down so that the rest of you will follow. Your emotions, your thoughts will follow, okay? And what I want you to do is to try this with me. So how this works is we inhale through our nose to fill our lungs, a big breath inhale. And as we've inhaled, we take a second inhale that's really quick. So inhale through our nose. Okay, do you hear that? So, right, a big inhale, a second quick inhale to top off the lungs, and a exhale through the mouth. We do this 3 times, ideally up to 5 minutes. And what this does is it fills our air sacs with life-giving oxygen, which is what we don't have when we're breathing really fast because we're really running hard and we're doing so many things and we can't really think of blah, 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 blah. And what the exhale does is that it releases the carbon dioxide within us, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, signals our heart rate to slow down. There was a study by Spiegel and Huberman, Stanford researchers in 2023, a control group that practiced cyclic sighing for 5 minutes for 1 month, 5 minutes a day for 1 month. And the result of that was that they lowered their resting heart rate. 5 minutes a day for 1 month. Okay. So as we close, we're going to do this together. I'm closing with this because I did tell you that this is going to take time, it's going to take effort, it's going to take intentionality, but it doesn't have to be miserable. And if you take nothing else from this and all you do is this one thing, it's a great place to start. Okay? So what we're going to just do this a couple times. So I encourage you to breathe in, and as you breathe in, imagine all of the air sacs in your lungs filling. And then a second top off breath, and then we're going to exhale through our mouth. Okay, so inhale in. It takes a little bit of practice, but if you're beginning to feel a little lightheaded, like fuzzy-headedness, it's working. And as you try that, that didn't even take 2 minutes. That was seconds. It's actually the fastest way to reduce your experience of stress, to reset yourself. And so I'm going to leave you with that as you go into lunch, to allow yourself to be reset, to go into lunch with a conversation with God, to see what He might invite you into to grow in your personal resilience and your professional resilience. Let me close with this quick prayer and send you out from Jeremiah 17. May you be blessed as you trust in the Lord and find your confidence in Him. May you be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. May you not fear when heat comes, and may your leaves always be green. May you never worry in a year of drought, and may you always bear fruit. God bless you.
Amen. Let's give Dr. Jean Cheng Gorman another round of applause. Thank you so much for blessing us with your presence, your scholarship, and just really just bringing yourself. Thank you. A couple of things. I forgot to mention this earlier. Thank you online, folks. A round of applause for them down here. Really glad having you as well and for your participation. And I will be sending those documents to you. Don't worry. You'll get them to you. You have till 12:30 for lunch. There was a schedule change. Unfortunately, Brenda Brainerd cannot be with us. We're not going to break out into workshop groups. They're all going to present together. Each are going to have 45-minute sessions. And we're all going to meet back in here. promptly at 12:30, beginning with Melody Charles Vanderwerf, Angie Mapora, and then we're going to have an embodied experience with Reverend William Mack. So be ready to move your body. Maybe not squats, but something else. So it's all of these workshops, fabulous, gifted scholars who are doing beautiful work, who are called by God to do this work, will be expounding, expanding, engaging on a whole on their own different levels with what Dr. Jean Cheng Gorman has shared. So be ready for a treat. And if you need some help looking out for some food eats here, they're right on that table. Where to go? Sissies, quick. Los Ardores, quick. Two Asian Brothers, quick. Trey Kroner, not quick, but good. Let's see here. Charcoal Delights, not my favorite, but Dr. Max Lee loves it. Quick. McDonald's, if you just want some fries, good. And yeah, so just stick around here. Be back here at 12:30. Thank you all.
Calls Lali.
Calling civil health.